Hey friends, it's that time again. Time for another episode of Create or Die. I'd like to thank you for tuning on in because without you, there's no show. It's just a dude talking to a microphone and looking slightly off camera. That's all you got. So, super glad that you're with us. So thank you. And we got a good one for you. You know, this is one of those where we've got a legit guest. He's come here to talk to us about creative playtime. What's that? Well, find out right after this. Yeah, like I mentioned, we've got an awesome guest. And before I take a minute to introduce him and tell you what he's all about, we got to do a little housekeeping, little business for the show here. And as you know, we're real big on sponsorships. Now the difference between the Create or Die program as it currently stands and a lot of other podcasts or shows out there is we have sponsorships that don't include us getting paid. Brilliant, right? That way we can feature any product we want and call it a faux sponsor because it's not real. It's pretend. It's just for laughs, okay? So today's faux sponsor is a little tool that I've recently discovered. Now there are other things like this out there, but this one I'm really starting to dig, okay? This is the Huion Key Touch Express, something along those lines. Essentially it's a little programmable device where you can plug in any of these buttons, you know, a command, and you can assign it these buttons based on the application that you're in. All right, so if you're in Photoshop and you want, this button to be the paintbrush, make it so. You've got this handy dandy dial here, okay, and that is great for things like brush size, zoom, scroll, all those kinds of things. So check it out. I picked mine up on Amazon, if you've ever heard of that place. We got some good stuff, you know. And it was on sale for like $39. Normally I think it's around $69 or $59, somewhere in that general region. And it's worth it. It's good. And it's stupid simple. It even comes with stickers that you can place on the buttons, so if you're just using it for a specific application or core application and you want to be able to remember without just kind of touchy-feely guessing, that's what you do. Just put your stickers on there. However, I'm using it for several applications, so I don't know that I'm going to go the sticker route, but there is a digital route. You click a button, boom, you get a screen that shows you, hey, look at this. It is, these are what the buttons are. All right. I'm going to go ahead and put an affiliate link, assuming I can get that set up. I haven't done it yet. So if you're interested in this, go pick it up. It's an affiliate link. I may get a kickback if I can figure it out. If not, I'm just going to include a link because, I'm that kind of guy. I'm doing a service for y'all. All right, for you individually. Can you believe it? It's like November already. I mean, literally, it seems like it was July last month. I was out on the boat enjoying the hot weather, getting a little wet in the water with the family, hanging out, living my best life. And I remember saying, Christmas gonna be here before we know it. Holidays are gonna be here. And we done passed Halloween. I know that's not necessarily what people are talking about when they're saying holidays, talking about those holidays within December, but I like to be super inclusive, so we're including Halloween, we're including Thanksgiving, we're including Festivus, all the things. So just know that this is that kind of program where we are inclusive, or super easy is maybe a better way to put it. But like I said at the onset, we've got us a good guest today. Today's guest is someone that I go way back with. We're talking 2006 or so. I mean, that was knocking on 20 years ago. Did that really happen? 2006? Seems like so long ago, yet not so long ago. Well, it did happen. And that is where I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Erik DeWaal, today's guest. Now, Erik is a man of many talents. I'll name a few. All right? He's an illustrator. He's a designer. He's a creative thinker, a strategizer, a super brainstormer, as you'll find out here in a moment. In addition to that, the dude is all about the music. He introduced me to some of my favorite bands. And I go back to those times when I first listened to some tunes from like Aqueduct, which I believe, if I'm my facts correct, he did some posters for them. And, he introduced me to that band, and I'm forever grateful. And there were others, for sure. S&M, just to name a few. So, thank you, Mr. Erik DeWaal, for that. And thank you for coming on the program. And without further ado, folks, let's go ahead and roll this. Erik, it's been a while. Thanks for agreeing to come on the program.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we go way back. We're talking 2005, 2006 range. I think is when you started working at fourth gear. I'd been there for a little bit, and that's awesome. And unfortunately, we haven't connected as often as I would have liked to. It seems like once every 5-10 years or so. But
yeah, definitely. We should have kept in touch more. I could definitely use your feedback on projects more often than I do. So.
Awesome. Well, we're starting now. So
yep, for sure.
A time like the present, we need to get a Slack going or something where creatives can just kind of share things with each other and hey, tell me how I can make this better. So
yeah,
awesome. So you've been to a few different agencies in that time frame, and obviously continue to grow. I see what you've done on social, like on Instagram with your plastic attack stuff. So you've been busy. Tell me a little bit more about your journey. If you want to go even way back, like how did you get into design in the first place?
Sure. It's funny because I feel like that's a question that comes up a lot. People ask what led you to, down this path and stuff. And for me, it's always there's a couple of key touch points, and I probably bring different ones up with different people at different times. But for sure, like I am of the generation that was raised with super amazing skateboard graphics, so that always helped pique in a lot of designers' interest in design work. But I also remember when I was fairly young, sort of first starting to get into like the type of clothing that I wanted to wear to express myself. I remember Stussy being one of the first brands that I ever noticed. Their typography on their shirts was always so cool, and just the graphics were just awesome, super fun, and so I loved their stuff. I had a good friend that was an artist, and I used to draw a lot, but he was much better than I was, and so it kind of caused me to back off a little bit. Occasionally, we worked on projects together in school and stuff. I remember one time we were in charge of this like calendar situation at our high school that was like in the main hall that kind of listed all the events for the month. And in the month of October, for some reason, we decided to zig instead of zag a little bit, and instead of doing like a real traditional Halloween theme, we did like a Star Wars theme, and he drew this super cool like Star Wars calendar, and then I brought all my action figures in, and we set them up in the this little display area, and had a lot of fun doing stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I would say he, even though he caused me to back off a little bit on my art, he definitely was a major influence in me in my, journey to getting where I am, because after I studied art, he and I bought a letterpress together, and that's how I started to really get interested in typography, using, that movable type, that old school way of laying out posters and printing cards and stuff like that. We had a bunch of wood type, and we bought a bunch of lead type as well, and just had a lot of fun with that learning curve. It was this massive piece of equipment that we had to use a forklift to move it around and stuff. I think it was a built in 1918 Chandler and Price clamshell press that we would mess around with and print wedding invitations occasionally and stuff. So anyway, from there, I taught myself design software, and got interested in graphic design, and got my first design job, and yeah, that was the end. So started reading a lot of books and learning how to work with type and layout and composition, stuff like that. So
yeah, no, and that's I'm glad you brought that up, books and kind of continuing education, because it's a field that's constantly evolving. Doesn't mean you can't look to the past and there are nods to what was done in the past, but a little bit of current twist to it, and so yeah, that's a cool journey. And speaking of nods to the past, that's one of the fun things about what you do with Plastic Attack, is they definitely seem to have that kind of retro vintage vibe. Talk a little bit more about kind of your inspiration and some of that stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I've always been kind of a pop culture guy. Super into movies and music and books and magazines. So I think that was like reference material was one thing. The stuff that I had to refer to is kind of why I have lean sort of retro in some of my stuff. But also, I just love, I've always been a huge animation fan. I've always loved cartoons, and it's interesting because, there's cartoons, but there's also like the title cards and the things that go along with it. There's character design, and there's background art and stuff like that. And when you really start to look at it, you can tell a difference between the pros and the ones that were kind of pushing it through. I think later on, like in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of animation that kind of came out that was like they were just cranking stuff out, you know what I mean? And so it wasn't always as good as the earlier stuff. But that's probably like a big reason why I approach things the way I do, is my love for classic animation, and a lot of those guys in the 50s and 60s, like Gene Deitch, and I think that's how you say his name. Obviously Chuck Jones, some of those guys super influential on me. But lately I've been really trying to kind of push a little bit on it and make it like so that it's not just straight retro, so that it's got kind of a updated vibe to it, so that I can not just sort of rehash things that have already been done.
Yeah, no, I like that, and that's interesting to hear. Kind of your love for animation. Is that something you, besides just the artistry of it or the character designs, and is that something you ever considered, like the hand drawn animation or the Hanna-Barbera puppet style kind of animation? Is that a path you ever considered?
Yeah, definitely. I took a claymation class at one point and had a lot of fun messing around with that. It's tricky, you know what I mean? Like that takes a lot of time to get something good. So, but I haven't really played around with a lot of animation stuff recently. That is something I would love to get into. I'd love to learn some software, After Effects or whatever, and try some animating on my own. But it's just one of those things. It's like there's so many parts of it, like I mentioned, that you could take a lifetime to master. You know what I mean? Just the character design alone is something you could spend a lifetime working on. And so it's hard to know when to, like when it's time to move on to a new process or learn something new. So
yeah, for sure. And that's something that I talk a lot about on this program, because I definitely feel like I'm self-diagnosed with creative ADD, where I like to, it's like squirrel, it's like, oh, I want to do some logo design or typography, or oh wait, there's this new, stuff they're doing with web or After Effects animation, and while that's definitely helped me in some ways, especially at smaller places. It's nice to be able to wear multiple hats. It's hard to really become an expert at one area, and so I had this inner struggle, like, man, you just got to grow up and be disciplined and kind of pick a lane. but then it's like, it's just fun. So.
That's interesting. I went to a networking event this week for Salt Lake Design Week, and I was just talking with some of the designers there, and somebody brought that up. They said that I guess I wasn't aware of this, but maybe there is a tendency for designers to they said the phrase they used, I believe, was like perpetual amateur or perpetual novice, like always finding something to learn and to start over with. And as they were talking about that, I recognize that in myself, and I feel like maybe that's something that a few of us struggle with. So
yeah, okay, yeah, I don't think I'm alone, and
yeah,
and I would, the flip side, or the argument that I usually hang my hat on is as like a creative leader, it's helpful to have a decent amount of knowledge in different areas so that you can communicate better with those specialists that you're working with.
Yeah.
So that's the one argument that I would hang my hat on there.
Definitely. Yeah, you got to be T-shaped, right? Like you got to.
Yeah.
It's good to have that, varying things that you know something about, but also to have that area that you're an expert in. So
yeah. That's good, and I don't know what my problem is, but I always hear about Salt Lake Design Week like the last day or the week after. So I need to set a reminder or whatever. But that's cool that you're able to get involved with that.
Yeah,
and that's awesome.
It was good. Yeah, I think that it's been a couple of years since they've done it.
Oh, sure.
And so, because they mentioned that, I went to two events this week, and both of them were well attended, and that was brought up that they felt like people are kind of like dying to get back together and get, back to these events.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And to kind of wrap up that conversation on what you're doing with Plastic Attack, I think it's super cool that you're continuing to evolve that, and I've noticed that as well in some of the things you posted. But my favorite project that you've done, and there's been multiple uploads and illustrations and things is that project you did a while back on the Burbs. Great movie from the 80s. I'd be curious to learn a little bit more about why the Burbs, kind of, what inspires you about that, if you have plans to take that further or pick a different movie. Or
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because The Burbs is absolutely one of my favorite movies. I think it's super underappreciated and underrated. Like, I noticed just this week, that I think it's got a 48% or something on Rotten Tomatoes, and I was like, oh, something's wrong. Like, people do not appreciate how great this movie is. I love it because it has a lot of elements in it that I enjoy. It's funny, but it's got an element of creepiness to it, and it addresses the fact that suburban America is weird. You know what I mean? Like, there's something strange about living in suburbia, and I love that. And so a few years ago, I recognized that there's just not a lot of fan art out there for the Burbs. And so I thought it would be a good area for me to kind of explore. I wanted to do some side projects, and so I wanted something that I was passionate about. And so I actually went through kind of a deep dive the summer that I started it, and I watched the movie like so many times. I probably watched it probably about 8 or 9 times in that summer. My family was so sick of it by then, but and then I found a podcast that I don't know if you're familiar, but there's like a whole series of podcasts by different people where they take a movie and they do each minute, and each episode of the podcast is 1 minute of the movie. And so, or 2 minutes maybe, I don't know. But anyway, I found one on the Burbs, and I listened to it, and it was cool to hear like these guys talk about it. They weren't like, I felt like they weren't as big of a super fan as I was, you know what I mean? So there was a couple times I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's amazing. That's an amazing scene. Shut up, But anyway, so I wanted to do some stuff with the Burbs, and so I started building out kind of a brand book, and I think it's going to be a project that I work on for a long time, because a brand book is something you can just continue and add to as you go on. And so a brand book and style guide. And so I started with lettering the title and trying to come up with like a new way of lettering the title and some patterns. And then I did a couple of illustrations of some of the main characters, and I started doing there's kind of, in my mind, some of the characters have like 2 sort of key outfits in the movie, and like I said, it's a simple movie. It's set in a cul-de-sac, and it only takes place over a couple of days, and so there's a lot that you can kind of expand on, and so that interested me as well. But so I started doing like these illustrations of the characters in 2 different outfits, and had a lot of fun with that. It was interesting because I hadn't really done much like vector portraiture like that, and so there was definitely a learning curve, and I've really gotten into drawing portraits a lot more since then, and I think it's really fun to try and simplify it down to those like key vector elements, but still get that character in there. I find that really challenging. Yeah,
you nailed it with those characters.
Thanks. There are a couple, like I feel like I got Tom Hanks pretty well. The Bruce Dern, like the one with glasses on, I feel great about. The other one, I'm a little bit like, I just feel like I'm not quite capturing, the Bruce Dernness of his face. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's super fun though. It's fun to try and like, I know you do a lot of like caricature art and stuff, and so it's fun to like try and capture, and sometimes you'll capture just something that it doesn't totally look like them, but you've captured something, a part of them that it immediately reads as them. You know what I mean? And so there's like kind of a magic in drawing people like that. So it was a lot of fun, and again, the type it was super fun to dig in on some type that I thought would fit better than maybe what they had done, and the typeface that I ended up using for the main logo that I did is called Reuben, and it's also used in a lot of like, not a lot, but it's used occasionally in some like horror posters and stuff like that. It was used on the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland, and so that was kind of where I made that connection to do a poster based on the Haunted Mansion, a Burbs version of the Haunted Mansion poster. You know what I mean? And it was also fun because one of the main characters is named Reuben in the Burbs, and so I was like, all right, this just fits too well, you know. So
That's perfect.
and that's quickly become one of my favorite typefaces as well. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I was going to say that definitely. I noticed a connection there with the Haunted Mansion. I didn't put them side by side and say, was this directly inspired, but you answered it right there, and
yeah,
I think it's a great nod to that amazing work done back in when would that have been? Was that the 50s?
Yeah, maybe 50s or 60s. I'm not sure exactly when that poster came out, but yeah, quite a while back.
Going back a ways.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And so I love that you have a creative outlet outside of like your day job, your commercial art, graphic design work that you do, because I think that's important, and I think that is a common characteristic among the best people that do what we do. Is and that's kind of where this podcast came about. Is like you've got this need to create inside that if you don't find an outlet for it, you're literally going to die.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Yeah. So I definitely can see that in what you do. But I'm curious, in all of the stuff you do, either on your own or in the workplace, is there a favorite part of the process for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to your point earlier, it's crucial to have some playtime for creativity, right? And that's why this is my plastic attack is what it is because I feel like playtime is crucial to creativity. But the part of the creative process there's kind of two parts that I love the most. I love brainstorming. I'm super passionate about that. I just absolutely love, one of my favorite things in the world is to lock myself in a room with 3 or 4 creative people that I admire and try and come up with ideas and solve problems. I think that's like, it's super fun. I could do that for hours. And then the other part that I really enjoy is there's a moment where the project starts to kind of take shape, and you get to, like, you have an idea and you recognize that it's going to be a good solution for whatever it is you're trying to do. And it's sort of that anticipation of this project being finished. It's exciting, and it's going to work. That part is my favorite. There's always parts after it, inevitably, even though I know this, like, it kills me. There are parts afterwards where you're like, this isn't going to work. You know what I mean? Like, I made a terrible decision. But if you push through, and that's really what you have to do, is sometimes you just got to push through and just work and grind on it until it hits what you're hoping that it will hit. So,
yeah. No, I love that, and I love that you brought up brainstorming, because I agree. But I've had really good experiences where get in there and it seems like we're in the zone and everybody's riffing off of each other and contributing. Then there's other times where you get in there and you're like, okay, we're gonna brainstorm, and so let's get your best ideas. Don't worry, there's no such thing as a bad idea. And then it's kind of crickets, and then if I'm leading it or whoever, they're like, how about this? So do you have, it sounds like you've done it a lot. You must have a secret as to how you ensure that it's a good brainstorming meeting.
I mean, I've been in those a few of those, and I think that for me, the one thing that I recognize that there are certain brainstorm meetings that were super successful, and I kind of went back and checked those and I built what I think is a really solid process for brainstorming, and that is that everyone on the team needs to spend an hour or two developing ideas on their own, and then they need to write down those ideas and then bring them to the brainstorm meeting. And for me, that's the launch pad. You know what I mean? You already have this baseline established, and you know, most of the time, if you're a professional creative, you know, you can usually come up with a series of ideas that are fairly solid and can create a good baseline. And so where I think the magic happens is when you see other people's baseline ideas, and then maybe, you know, you combine them with something from somebody else's idea, or, you know, one idea. Maybe sometimes this happens, like you don't quite understand your idea, and so you make sort of these preconceived notions for what they're talking about, and then that actually becomes a better idea than what they've brought to the meeting. And so I really think that you know, coming with some ideas prepared is crucial. And then you know, the hardest part is not self-censoring. That's super difficult, but you know, if you can get past that, I think that's when magic happens for sure.
No, that's awesome, and that makes perfect sense. Is, you know, because if people have put in some time, get those wheels kind of moving, then by the time you get in there, you can skip kind of that awkward stage of warming up, and then hopefully, you know, strike while the iron's hot, if you will. So,
yeah.
Awesome. Well said. Well, cool. Man, we could just keep digging in. I'm having fun. I'm like, let's start a brainstorming session right now on something. You know, what's another movie like The Burbs that we can collaborate on? But I know we're already almost at time here, and I'm curious to know, with all your experience, you know, I assume that you've probably experienced this already, but if you haven't, here's a chance to think about it. Is let's say someone just starting out, you know, you have a friend whose child wants to go into design or illustration. What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my advice to them is, a friend of mine, she teaches up at the University of Utah, and she's brought me in the last few years as a guest lecturer up there. And I always kind of start my lecture talking about a few different things. There's a friend of mine who is a designer, and he's been super successful. Like, he started really successful agencies, and he actually taught at a school, and he went in and he asked all the students, he said, like, who here wants to learn how to screen print? Who here wants to learn how to letterpress? Who here wants to learn how to do hand lettering and stuff? And, you know, inevitably all these students who are excited about design raise their hand, and he goes, I'm not teaching you any of that. I'm going to teach you how to make money as a graphic designer. And so there's sort of that school of thought, you know, but then there's also this other school that, you know, we do need people to letterpress and hand letter and screen print and, you know, get their hands dirty and experiment, you know what I mean? And do things that way, because that's when I think really, big movements in creativity happen. So I always tell students that, you know, there's a variety of different approaches to design, but the one thing that I think is super crucial is a few years back, Ira Glass, he did I don't know if it was like a lecture or what it was, but he talked about how when you start out as a creative, your ability to create, your talent level is here, but your taste level is up here, right? And that's why you got into it, is because you have good taste for whatever it is that you're doing. And so when you start out, the stuff you're creating is not going to be up to your taste level. And so what you have to do is you have to just put in hours and hours and hours until you reach that point where your talent and your taste are aligned. And that's what that's when you can really start producing good work. I think it took me some time to learn that. You know what I mean? That you've got to get some road under your tires. You've got to get some experience before you're going to be able to create things at a level that you're happy with. And so, just get ready to put in a lot of hours. That's what I tell them.
No, I love that. That's great. And it's just like, don't expect to be some savant right out of the gates. That it does take time. You learn a certain amount in school, but the real world teaches you so much, and then it's just like you say, road under the tires and that experience. Wow, I love it, man. So we are definitely going to have to get together and do lunch, brainstorm over lunch.
Yep.
Like I said, that'll be fun. But let's just say someone else wanted to get in touch with you and pick your brain and invite you to speak at BYU or something. I don't know if that's allowed, if you can speak at both of those institutions. But how would someone get in touch with you if they wanted to?
Yeah, my website is plastikattack.com. That's also my Instagram handle. And Instagram is kind of where I just post all my more experimental, just fun stuff. And my website is more like for commercial projects, and has my portfolio, like the stuff that more big long-term campaigns and stuff like that. But yeah, both those sites, plastikattack.com and at plastikattack
on Instagram. I love it. Cool. Well, once again, Erik, really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the program.
You bet. Happy to do it. I love that you've got this podcast, and happy to be on here. So thanks.
Awesome. Well, what I tell you, pretty sweet. He's a fun guy. Again, thank you, Erik, for coming on the program, and we're definitely going to do that lunch very soon, my friend. So I'm looking forward to that. But man, there's just so much to digest. The things we got into there, talking illustration and typography, creative playtime, the title of this episode. So what do you think about that? Is that important to you? I mean, we go to work, we do our thing, hopefully you're able to get some creative outlets happening at your day job. But if not, then that creative playtime becomes that much more important. Now, I'll tell you, I love my job. I'm grateful to be working, in the design industry, using the Adobe Suite, Blender, Cinema 4D, all these tools that I just love to use. But I'll be honest, there's parts of it that aren't so fun, that do get a little long in the tooth. You've established a brand, it's time to create another white paper done using the same template, or you're in another meeting where you're talking about the business side of things, the people management side of things, that while they're necessary and important, and I know I need to get better at all those things, it's not necessarily scratching my creative itch. And so that creative playtime, man, so important. And lately, over the past 6 months to a year, I've taken on some more contract work as an opportunity to kind of grow my portfolio and network, but also as an opportunity to, sure, it's not playtime, but I'm getting paid time. That's good, right? To do work for another brand, solve a problem that's maybe a little different than what I get at the day job. So there's playtime and paid time. But that paid time, as awesome as it is to get them dollar bills flowing, right? You need the playtime. So, have the iPad at the ready, open up, a program that you've been meaning to learn more about. Eric, I challenge you to open up After Effects. You mentioned it on the call, something that you want to learn. Use that as maybe a playtime outlet. Take some of your awesome illustrative pieces around, the burbs, for example, and do some limited animation to bring those to life. And I guarantee you'll be having fun. The playtime. Put the play in playtime. How about that? So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Eric. That was well put, my friend. And in addition, we just talked about inspiration, things that inspired he and I from our youth. Both grew up in the 80s loving those cartoons. Now you go back with the lens of a 40-something-year-old adult and watch those. It's a little harder to get through, but you have that nostalgia factor, thankfully, to help get you through. But then for me, what I'm thinking of is like someone needs to do some serious justice to ThunderCats, not ThunderCats, because they can. ThunderCats, one of the greatest cartoons of all time. Not because the storytelling was amazing, the acting was amazing, the animation was amazing, because they weren't. I'll tell you what was amazing: the overall idea about these humanoid cats having to leave their home world, find a new world, and start over. And then one of them, a boy named Lionel, was like the son of the king and queen back on Thundera, I believe was the name of the planet. And he was given these tools. Anyways, yeah, it was awesome. This sword that was small and could fit easily on your belt, kind of like your iPhone. But then when you needed to get down to business, take things, to a whole nova level. And in case you don't know, I got that from Keegan Michael Key. Is that his name? Keegan Michael Key. Anyways, back to ThunderCats. But what was so awesome about that is in the 80s, you had the best posters. Drew Struzan, the way he would put the different figures, little mini scenes, the up close face, use color to evoke the emotion of things. Imagine that, like the best Star Wars posters, alright? But then in an animated intro. So go back, watch the ThunderCats animated intro, because it's awesome. It's literally the best intro of all time. I'm telling you. There were others that came close, but it's the best. So, long story short, someone needs to do it justice. Recently we had some freaking Cartoon Network silly ThunderCats crap. And I appreciate a little humor. You want to do a parody of something? Well, that was it. But that didn't do it justice. I've seen some fan art out there. I've done a piece myself, and there's some that come close to doing Lionel, Chitara, Panthro, and the gang justice, but they come up short. And so I'm waiting for someone to really take it to the next level. Now, He-Man, Masters of the Universe, that's been done several times, and I'm pretty happy to say that the most recent Netflix series, now I heard it's been canceled, He-Man, Masters of the Universe on Netflix, it's the 3D animated one, because there was another one like He-Man Revelations, which is 2D, kind of looks like an evolution of the original, which is cool in and of itself. And they've improved the story and definitely worth a watch. I think that only had one season. But this other one, the 3D animated one, I've got figures of them, because you know what it did is it wasn't trying necessarily to be a grown-up show for people like me in their 40s and 50s who grew up with this. No. What they did was they reinvented it for a younger generation. All right? So, like my 5-6-year-old daughter and my 3-year-old, 4-year-old daughter, and I'm using a range here because, you know, during the times when we would watch it, which was about a year ago, they loved it. You know, there was this catchy song at the beginning, you know, and I forget how it goes, but they'd get up and dance around. And so, and what it did for me is it helped me get back in touch with that child side that loved He-Man, you know, that put myself in those characters and just wanted to have the power and get out there and punch Skeletor in the face, you know, and then be like, hey Tila, you're a babe, you know, let's go. Yeah, never mind. But it's a fun show. So, He-Man, check. You did it in my book. Now, it doesn't mean there isn't room for more. And speaking of He-Man, I remember how happy I was for He-Man the movie, the motion picture, is that what they call it? With Dolph Lundgren as He-Man. You know, that was cool in its own way, and the director or whatever took like creative license and went totally different place, tried to make it a little bit more like a futuristic Conan the Barbarian, which was the original inspiration for He-Man. But, you know, no. It was a major letdown. You know, Skeletor was cool because it's like, oh wow, this is what the real Skeletor might look like. You know, it's not just a skeleton face, it's kind of a melted off, you know, zombie-esque skeletal face or whatever, which was cool. But then they're introducing all these other weird characters, and the outfits, the costume design was just a little too out there. It was like, came out in like 1986, you know, so like big hair bands, heavy metal, inspired, you know, freaking Mad Max Thunderdome, which is good, but that wasn't trying to be He-Man. Anyways, now if you're still with us, thank you, because I know this wasn't necessarily what you signed up for when you went on this journey with me on this episode. You came for the creative playtime. You came to hear from Mr. Erik DeWaal, but here I am waxing lyrically on my favorite 80s cartoons. So if you're not here and I am just talking to myself at this point, so be it. We're still gonna ship this junk. Okay, it's going out there. There is an audience somewhere. I guarantee it. Okay. So you can just see how inspiration can get the mind going. So that was, it's like scene. Okay, you just saw me geeking out for like 10 minutes on what makes for a good animated TV show from the 80s and how they've been reinvented in later years, and most of them poorly. Okay, so ThunderCats, why can't I say that correctly? ThunderCats, there's a huge opportunity there for someone who's willing to really run with it and understand the essence of what made that awesome. Okay, here we go. We keep going. Enjoy this time of year. It's a good time. You got the fall, beautiful colors. You got football on TV. You've got the holiday seasons, the sugar plums dancing in the heads of the youngins in your life. Soak it up. That's all I can say. That's what I'm gonna try to do. Got a dog barking in the background. Trying to record over here. Okay. But when you're not doing that, keep on creating. Create or die.